Communism didn't vanish in China. It went underground, and now it's rising again. The West spent decades celebrating China's rise, the skyscrapers, the GDP, the tech boom. But beneath all that glass and steel, one thing never changed. The Communist Party never let go. It adapted. It hid behind market reforms. And then, slowly, it began to choke everything it had helped create. Now, China's miracle is unraveling. The population is shrinking. The private sector is suffocating. Youth unemployment is exploding. And the communist system that once built the boom is now dragging the entire country into stagnation and decay. This isn't a downturn, it's a political time bomb. And it's ticking faster than anyone thought. Let's break down how the past is eating China's future alive, and why the collapse that's coming won't be loud, but slow, grinding, and inescapable. The West got played. For decades, we watched China's transformation and told ourselves a comforting story that economic freedom would eventually lead to political freedom, that capitalism would erode communism from within, that the party would fade as prosperity grew. We were wrong. Dead wrong. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping struck a deal that would define China for the next half-century. The bargain was simple, brutal, and brilliant. You can get rich, we keep absolute power. No elections, no independent courts, no free press, no opposition parties. Just prosperity in exchange for obedience. And for a while, it worked. Investors poured in billions, convinced they were witnessing the birth of a new economic superpower. But here's what everyone missed. The reforms were never about freedom. They were about survival. The Communist Party was on the brink after Mao's catastrophic experiments killed tens of millions through famine and chaos. Deng saved the party by giving it a new purpose, delivering growth. But the iron cage of one-party rule, that never budged an inch. The party controlled the police, the military, the courts, the media. Every lever of power stayed firmly in their hands. Markets were allowed to flourish, but only as long as they served the party's interests. Step out of line and you disappear. This was the illusion of reform, a communist regime that looked like it was liberalizing, but was actually just getting better at hiding its authoritarian core. And the world bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. For years, this hybrid model delivered astonishing results. Double-digit GDP growth, hundreds of millions lifted out of poverty, gleaming infrastructure built at breakneck speed. The party excelled at mobilization, at forcing compliance, at bulldozing obstacles. When Beijing wanted something done, it got done. No protests, no delays, just raw, centralized power unleashed on a massive scale. But here's the thing about authoritarian efficiency. It works brilliantly in the catch-up phase. When you're building highways, copying foreign technology, and throwing cheap labor at manufacturing, you don't need creativity or freedom. You just need discipline and capital. And China had both in abundance. But the very strengths that powered the boom were quietly planting the seeds of collapse. Because a system built on fear and obedience can mobilize people, but it can't inspire them. Innovation dies in climates where questioning authority is dangerous. Trust evaporates when everyone suspects their neighbor might inform on them. And when political priorities trump economic logic, vast sums get misallocated into ghost cities, redundant factories, and zombie enterprises that drain resources for decades. The cracks were forming long before anyone noticed. Each year, it took more debt to generate less growth. Returns on investment kept shrinking. The easy gains were drying up. But as long as the growth numbers looked good on paper, nobody asked whether the foundation was rotting from within. And then came Xi Jinping. In 2012, he inherited a country transformed by 3 decades of reform and burdened by every contradiction we've just described. Some hoped he'd be a reformer. Others feared he'd be a hardliner. Turns out he's something more dangerous. The system's truest believer. Xi didn't break the Chinese model. He perfected it. He revealed what it always was, a communist dictatorship that had temporarily loosened its grip, but never let go. And now that grip is tightening like a vice. In 2018, Xi scrapped presidential term limits, clearing the path to rule for life. The anti-corruption campaign he launched? Sure, it caught some corrupt officials, but it also purged rivals, terrified the bureaucracy into submission, and concentrated power in his hands to a degree not seen since Mao. Today, Xi commands absolute authority. There are no checks, no balances, no opposition. The party answers to him and him alone. And what has he done with that power? He's turned the clock backward. Tech billionaires who got too big, too independent, too bold, crushed. Jack Ma, once the face of China's entrepreneurial spirit, criticized regulators in 2020. His company's massive IPO was canceled overnight. He vanished from public view for months. The message was crystal clear. No one is untouchable. The private sector exists at the party's pleasure, and that pleasure can be revoked in an instant. Xi's regulators have since kneecapped the tech industry with wave after wave of crackdowns, fines, restrictions, forced restructuring. Innovation hubs that were once buzzing with energy now operate under a cloud of fear. Entrepreneurs spend more time studying party doctrine than building products, because in Xi's China, ideological loyalty matters more than market success. Meanwhile, surveillance has metastasized into every corner of life. Cameras with facial recognition track your movements. Social credit systems monitor your behavior. Apps on your phone report what you read, who you talk to, what you buy. Dissent isn't just discouraged, it's digitally cataloged and punished. Students who question the party line find themselves blacklisted. Activists disappeared into detention. Civil society organizations have been systematically dismantled. Independent voices silenced. The goal is total control. Xi calls it common prosperity. The reality? Economic strangulation wrapped in communist rhetoric. And it's working exactly as intended. The party is stronger than ever, but the economy? Well, that's a different story. Because while Xi was busy consolidating power and enforcing ideological purity, the economic engine that powered China's rise started to sputter, then stall, then seize. Youth unemployment skyrocketed past 20% in 2023, and then the government simply stopped publishing the data. When the numbers got too embarrassing, just hide them. Problem solved, right? Except millions of young Chinese graduates know the truth. They're living it. 4 years of university, crushing competition, endless exams. All for what? No jobs, no prospects, no future. They call it lying flat, or let it rot. A generation so disillusioned, they're opting out of the system entirely. The real estate market, which accounted for nearly 30% of China's economy, is imploding. Property giants like Evergrande and Country Garden, companies once worth hundreds of billions, have defaulted on their debts. They owe more money than they could ever repay. Unfinished apartment towers sit abandoned across the country. Ghost cities stretch for miles. Home buyers who poured their life savings into pre-construction units now own nothing but broken promises. And local governments, which funded themselves by selling land to developers, are drowning in hidden debt. The revenue stream is gone. The bills are coming due. And there's no bailout big enough to fix it. Meanwhile, GDP growth, the single metric the party staked its legitimacy on, is slowing to levels not seen in decades. The official numbers say around 5%. Independent analysts think it's lower. Some think it's much lower. In 2010, a top Chinese official admitted that GDP statistics were man-made and unreliable. Nothing has changed since. The numbers are whatever Beijing needs them to be. But here's the thing, even if the numbers are real, they're built on a foundation of unsustainable debt. Corporate debt alone is over 160% of GDP. Local government debt is hidden in thousands of off-balance sheet financing vehicles. Nobody knows the true extent of the liabilities. Zombie state-owned enterprises that should have failed years ago are kept alive with endless loans because letting them collapse would be politically unacceptable. Banks evergreen bad debts rather than write them off, roll over the loans, pretend they're performing, kick the can down the road. The entire system is pretending everything is fine while the ground beneath them crumbles. And foreign investors? They're getting out. Capital is fleeing China faster than it's coming in. Companies are moving supply chains to Vietnam, India, Mexico, anywhere but China. The geopolitical environment has soured. The regulatory unpredictability has spooked everyone. The era of easy integration into the global economy is over. And Xi's response to all of this? Tighten control even more. This isn't a cyclical downturn. It's structural collapse in slow motion. And it's getting worse, because underneath all these economic failures lies a demographic catastrophe that China inflicted on itself and can never undo. In 1980, the Communist Party made one of the most arrogant decisions in human history. They decided they could engineer the perfect population. The one-child policy was born. For 35 years, the state invaded the most intimate corners of people's lives. Women pregnant without permission were forced into abortions. Families were fined, harassed, destroyed. Rural areas, desperate for sons to carry on the family name, quietly committed infanticide against baby girls. The gender imbalance became grotesque. Today, China has roughly 30 million more men than women. 30 million men who will never find a wife, never start a family, never have children of their own. That's an entire generation of surplus males, a recipe for social instability that no one knows how to solve. But the consequences go far beyond gender ratios. In 2022, for the first time in almost 60 years, China's population declined. The number of deaths exceeded births. The decline has only accelerated since. By mid-century, China will lose hundreds of millions of people. Not from war, not from disease, but from a policy choice made by technocrats who thought they could control fertility like a factory production line. And now the bill is coming due. The workforce is shrinking every single year. Fewer workers mean fewer taxpayers, fewer consumers, fewer innovators. Meanwhile, the number of elderly retirees is exploding. The dependency ratio is skyrocketing. In the past, Chinese families had multiple children to care for aging parents. Now, thanks to the one-child policy, you have the 4-2-1 problem. One adult child responsible for 2 parents and 4 grandparents. The math doesn't work. The burden is unbearable. The social fabric is tearing. And the cruelest irony? The party is now begging people to have more children. They've relaxed the policy to 2 kids, then 3. Propaganda posters plaster cities urging young couples to embrace parenthood. State media runs campaigns celebrating large families. But young Chinese aren't interested. They grew up as pampered only children in families that poured everything into them. They've watched housing costs soar beyond reach. In major cities, an apartment can cost 40 times the average annual salary. They've seen the economy stagnate and opportunities evaporate. Education costs are crushing. The competition is brutal. The 996 work culture, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, leaves no time for family life. They don't trust the future, and they definitely don't trust the party that spent decades forcing their parents' generation to abort pregnancies and now suddenly wants babies. The phrase circulating online says it all. I won't bring a child into this. You can't command fertility. You can't bully people into reproduction. The damage is done, and it's irreversible. By the end of this century, China could lose 400 million people. The world's most populous nation is headed toward demographic extinction. and there's nothing Beijing can do to stop it. If you're finding this eye-opening, hit subscribe to Fall of Nations, because what comes next gets even darker. The demographic collapse is just beginning. And just when China needs innovation most, the brightest minds are heading for the exits. Educated Chinese, the scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs who could lead the next phase of growth, are leaving in droves. Students go abroad for university and don't come back. Researchers take jobs in Singapore, the US, Europe, anywhere with intellectual freedom and opportunity. The brain gain that China enjoyed for decades has reversed into a terminal brain drain. And who can blame them? Why stay in a country where you're constantly surveilled? Where questioning authority can destroy your career? Where innovation is stifled by ideological litmus tests? Academia is censored, research is controlled, entire fields of inquiry are off limits if they contradict party orthodoxy. You can track every citizen's footsteps with facial recognition. You can monitor every transaction, every conversation, every click. But you can't force people to stay. You can't innovate your way to prosperity when your best minds are fleeing. The surveillance state creates a paradox. Total control, zero inspiration. Fear keeps people in line, but it also kills creativity. And without creativity, without risk-taking, without the freedom to fail and try again, economies stagnate. China is learning this lesson the hard way. The students who remain whisper a chilling verdict. There's no future here, only obedience. That's the voice of a generation that's given up. Not just on the economy, on the system itself. They see the writing on the wall. Work hard, stay quiet, obey the rules, and still end up with nothing. So why bother? The social contract is broken. The promise of prosperity in exchange for submission no longer holds. And Xi's solution? More propaganda, more nationalism, more control. But the fewer voices that remain, the louder the party has to scream to drown out the silence. Because in a country of 1.4 billion people, the most dangerous sound is the one Beijing can't stand. The sound of hope dying. And as hope fades, fear spreads like frost. Welcome to the new era of Chinese governance, the fear state. It never really went away, it just wore a mask during the boom years. Now the mask is off. Social credit systems track your behavior and punish deviation. Miss a debt payment? Blacklisted. Criticize the government online? Blacklisted. Associate with the wrong people? Blacklisted. Your ability to travel, get loans, even send your kids to good schools depends on your score. And the score is controlled by the state. Facial recognition cameras blanket every major city. AI algorithms track your movements, your associations, your habits. Uyghurs in Xinjiang live under a dystopian surveillance regime so extreme it's being called a digital concentration camp. But the tools being perfected there? They're spreading nationwide. Arrests for online speech have skyrocketed. A joke on WeChat can land you in detention. A shared article criticizing party policy can end your career. Lawyers who defend dissidents are disbarred or disappeared. Journalists who investigate corruption are jailed. Civil society has been systematically crushed. There are no independent labor unions in China. All unions answer to the state. Religious groups must register with the government and toe the party line. Underground churches are raided. Falun Gong practitioners are persecuted. NGOs that focused on human rights or governance have been shuttered or driven underground. Any institution that could serve as a check on party power has been neutralized or destroyed. What remains is an atomized population, 1 billion individuals connected vertically to the state, but lacking horizontal bonds of trust. And in a society where trust has been eroded for 70 years, the economic consequences are devastating. Officials lie about data because admitting failure is career suicide. Companies cook their books because transparency is dangerous. Banks hide bad loans because acknowledging them would trigger panic. Local governments report fake GDP numbers because Beijing demands growth targets be met. The entire system runs on deception, and when everyone knows everyone is lying, trust collapses. Investors don't know which companies are sound. Lenders don't know which loans are good. Citizens don't know which statistics are real. It's an economy built on quicksand, and the cracks are starting to show. You don't need a labor camp when your phone already tracks your sins. You don't need gulags when social credit scores can destroy you quietly, digitally, efficiently. This is totalitarianism optimized for the 21st century. Orwell's 1984 with Chinese characteristics. And as fear spreads, the economy doesn't just slow, it freezes. Because when people are afraid, they don't take risks. They don't start businesses. They don't invest. They don't spend. They hoard cash and keep their heads down. Entrepreneurs stop innovating and start studying party doctrine. Officials stop making bold decisions and start covering their tracks. The system becomes paralyzed by its own paranoia. And at the center of it all is Xi Jinping, tightening his grip even as the country he rules crumbles beneath him. Here's the fatal contradiction that the Communist Party can no longer avoid. The system demands absolute political control, and the people demand ever-rising living standards. For decades, those two goals aligned. The party delivered growth, and the people tolerated authoritarian rule. But now those goals have collided head-on. To keep delivering prosperity, China needs the dynamism that comes from openness, flexibility, trust, and freedom. It needs entrepreneurs willing to take risks without fearing arbitrary crackdowns. It needs young people optimistic about the future. It needs institutions that can adapt through honest feedback. It needs innovation, and innovation requires freedom to question, to experiment, to fail, to challenge authority. But freedom is the one thing the Communist Party will never allow, because freedom threatens control, and control is what the party values above all else. So they're left with an impossible choice: loosening the reins and risk losing power, or tightening control and watch the economy stagnate. We know which path they've chosen, and we know where it leads. The collapse isn't coming, it's already here. It's just happening quietly. Local governments are drowning in hidden debt they can never repay. The numbers are staggering. Estimates run into the trillions of dollars. For years, they funded themselves by selling land to developers. Now the real estate market has imploded and the revenue is gone, but the debt remains. Infrastructure projects that were supposed to drive growth now sit half-finished and abandoned. High-speed rail lines run nearly empty. Airports built for millions of passengers see a fraction of that. Entire districts of gleaming office towers stand vacant. It's not just waste, it's the visible evidence of a system that can't allocate resources efficiently, because politics always trumps economics. The economy isn't crashing in a spectacular blaze, it's calcifying, ossifying, freezing into stagnation. GDP growth, once the envy of the world, is grinding to a halt. Official projections keep getting revised downward. The demographic decline guarantees that growth will keep slowing for decades to come. Fewer workers, fewer consumers, an aging population draining resources that should be invested in the future. And the party's response? More propaganda, more nationalism, more rallying against external enemies. They can't fix the structural problems, so they're trying to distract from them. Blame the Americans, blame the Japanese, blame anyone but the system itself. But the system is the problem, and everyone knows it. The communist DNA that powered the early boom is now the poison killing the patient. You can't innovate without freedom. You can't build trust without transparency. You can't adapt without feedback. And you can't sustain growth when fear replaces ambition. China's greatest enemy isn't America. It isn't demographics. It isn't debt. It's the political structure that refuses to evolve. The party thought it could have it both ways: market dynamism and political control. prosperity and dictatorship, innovation and obedience. For a while, it worked, but that era is over. The contradictions have caught up, and there's no way out. The world thought China's collapse would be loud. Tanks in the streets, revolution in Tiananmen Square, a Soviet-style implosion. But it's not happening that way. It's happening in silence, in empty apartments, in unemployed graduates lying flat, in researchers leaving for foreign labs, in birth rates that keep falling, in debt that keeps growing, in surveillance that keeps tightening, in hope that keeps fading. This is what collapse looks like in the 21st century. Not a bang, a slow grinding suffocation, and the shadow of communism, the shadow that never left, just hid in the dark, is the hand around China's throat. The party chose control over growth, and in the end, they'll have neither. Because you can't command an economy to grow with slogans and censorship. You can't force innovation with surveillance and fear. You can't reverse demographic collapse with propaganda. And you can't build a prosperous future on a foundation of lies. China's miracle is over. What comes next is the reckoning. And it will be slow, grinding, and inescapable. The communist shadow of the past is crushing the future. And there's no escape. So, what do you think? Is this the beginning of the end for the Chinese Communist Party? Or will they double down even harder, tightening control until the whole system collapses under its own weight? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more hard-hitting geopolitical analysis that cuts through the noise, subscribe to Fall of Nations. Because while the world sleeps, empires crumble. And we're here to show you exactly how it happens.